important. It just means that we're not going to bother with the rules because for the most part you will not be making up any words. You'll not be writing any scripture, hopefully. But the accents will be important for you to learn, to note, to include in your writing of any words. When you're doing the exercises later on, you'll be going from Greek to English and then English to Greek. And when you go to English to Greek, you'll need to put accents on. Now, these accents are the acute, the circumflex, and the grave. Acute, circumflex, and grave. You'll see this in Machen on page 11 and number 6. Acute, circumflex, and grave. Now, the purpose of the accents originally was to give tonal quality. It was almost like a singing. In fact, the word for accent in modern Greek is called the tonos. The tonos, to give the tone. Well, we don't know anything about that tone now, what tone was given, and so we use it only to show the accent where the emphasis is placed on what syllable, or as someone has said, the emphasis on the right syllable. So we will put the accent then on the right syllable, adelphos. See? Now that isn't adelphos, it isn't adelphos, but adelphos. Accent on this, and the accent will always go over either a vowel or the second letter of a diphthong, wherever it is in the word. It will never go here, for instance. That would be wrong. Never here. That's a consonant. Only on the vowels. And the vowels in Greek are much like the vowels in English: A, E, I, O, and U. So those will be your vowels, and you can read that in Machen, and you'll observe that as you go along. Accent on the proper syllable, and then make that the pronunciation. It's very hard for us to grasp that in who have come up with learned English as our first language. But remember that adelphos would be the pronunciation of that word. Now, having learned the accents, you need to learn something right next to it, and that is the breathing mark. When I wrote this word, I also had a little mark here. This mark is called a breathing mark. This is a smooth breathing. This is a rough breathing. Now, it makes no difference in the pronunciation in our modern pronunciation. So it simply notes there, and it will change the meaning of a word. So we do need to have the right one. We need to have one on every word that begins with a vowel or a diphthong, and we need to have the proper one. Because if you don't, you'll have a word like this. These are two different words depending on the accent. I'd have the accent or the breathing mark this way or this way. Now that means in with the smooth breathing. With the rough breathing, it means one. Now there are many words like this, and the accent will make a difference. No pronunciation difference, but the meaning difference. So note the breathing marks. You'll find this on page 11 in Machen, paragraph 5. Now the syllables. We have the three syllables, the only ones that have a name. A word may have many syllables, but the name is only given to the last three for rules of accenting and so forth. This one is called the ultima, and you can remember that because this is the ultimate. The last, the ultimate, the ultima. Then there's the penult. Penult. Now, this is really, if it were spelled all the way out, it would be penultima. And the short is penult. You see, it stops here. Penult. But it really, penultima means the one before the ultima. Penultima before the ultima. So we have the ultima, the one before the ultima, which is the penult. And then we have the one before, which is anti-penult. So, the ultima, the penult, the anti-penult, the ultima, the one before the ultima, and the one before the ultima, or whatever. That's the way they're learned. Ultima, penult, anti-penult. We do that simply to name, if I want to tell you, put the accent on the ultima, I expect you to know where the ultima is. We'll use that later on. Then we have the punctuation, which will be some different, but for the most part, and for all we're going to do now, is simply say that in Greek, the period is a period, the comma is a comma, and that's all you'll need to know for now. Later on, when we get to the question mark, chapter 26 or 27, then we'll need to talk about it, but you would have forgotten it by then anyway, so we'll need to reteach you. Now remember what we said, you must learn a chapter at a time. You must go from one chapter to the next. You must be able to get the one thing solid and then build upon that. So I'm suggesting to you that you learn to write the words, the alphabet, that you learn to pronounce it, and use the cassette tape to go over that. Go to chapter 3 or chapter 4 and move the tape up to there and then listen to the vocabulary. And then cut the tape off and see if you can say the words. For instance, on page 20, Vlepo, I see. Yinosko, I know. Grafo, I write, and so forth. We'll talk about this in the next lesson. But learn those, practice them, check yourself out, and then when you have a good grasp of that, then go on to lesson 3. Build solid foundation, and then you shouldn't have any problem. We'll do lesson 3 when we come back. Today we're going to start on the real Greek. We're going to learn something you can write down, something you can make sense out of. And this is chapter 3, page 20 of Machen, and then in the workbook on page 1. The exhortation that Machen gives us about vocabularies, he said that we should learn the vocabulary after you learn the paradigms and the explanation parts of the sentence. In other words, we ought really to learn the forms, learn all the grammar, then learn the vocabulary, then do the exercises. Now, we're not going to do that exactly. We're going to take it a little bit in order, and we'll talk about the vocabulary first, but please try to learn that after you've learned the forms. It's not so important in this lesson, but in the future lessons it will make a difference. Let me also give you an exhortation of my own, and that is that if you do not learn the vocabulary, especially, and the forms, secondarily, then you're not going to understand Greek. You must learn that vocabulary. That's a very important thing. So let me say, get your tape out, use it. The vocabulary tapes, these tapes will give you the forms and the vocabulary over and over and over. Use it, take it in your car, do whatever you can to listen to this tape often. And the cards, whether you make your own or use the ones already prepared, do use the cards. Take them with you. Use them, learn them over and over so that it becomes second nature to you. And the quizzes, you'll notice, will be both Greek to English and English to Greek. I may give me the word for I see, and I'll expect you to be able to give me the Greek as well. We'll do that for the first 8 or 10 lessons, and then we'll stay strictly with the Greek to English. But for now, learn them both ways, backward and forward, so that you can really master the meanings of the words, then you can go on to other things. Now, the vocabulary of this lesson, lesson 3, page 20, paragraph 16. Here it is. Vlepo, I see. Notice, vlepo, V sound. Vlepo, I see. Yinosko, I know. Now that gamma there has a Y sound because there's an E to it. Yinosko, I know. Y sound. Grafo, I write. Notice I tried to roll my R there. Grafo, grafo, I write. Didasko, I teach. Didasko, I teach. Lamvano, I take. Lamvano, I take. Lego, I say. Leo, I loose or I destroy. Echo, I have. That's the vocabulary. Now, with a verb, whether it's in English or in Greek, you have certain aspects. We call these the aspects of the Greek. And they are tense, voice, mood, person, and number. Now in the workbook, you see on page 1 the various tenses, and we're going to pick up this. We'll be on this page right throughout our study of the Greek. We'll have tense, and then on the next page, voice, and so forth. Now we'll show you that as we go. But for now, tense, and I'm going to give you a general definition of the particular aspect, and then we'll give you the specific definition or the particular tense in which we are working. Now, the general description of tense is, it describes the action of the verb in relation to the time of the action and kind of action. So when you talk about a tense, you're going to be talking about what kind of action does it represent and what time of action does it represent. Now, time of action is only in the indicative. When we get to the other moods, we'll talk about that. But for now, we want to know in the present tense. This is what we're studying in this chapter. Present tense. What time is it? Well, in the indicative, the time of the present tense is the present time. So in your workbook, write out here, present time. Time of action in the present tense is present time. Kind of action is continuous. Continuous. You can represent that by a dotted line. Continuous action. Continuing. Now, that's true in one aspect, but it also is, it refers to point of action. So, continuous action and point of action in the present tense. We also have voice. Tense, voice. Now, on page 2, you see the general definition of voice. Voice is voice describes the relationship between the subject of and the action of the verb. Now, specifically the active voice. We're talking only about active here. Active, write this in, shows the subject producing the action. The active voice, the subject produces the action. That's the definition of active voice. Mood. Mood, general, the mood describes the relationship between the statement and reality. Is it real? Is it unreal? Is it fulfilled? Is it unfulfilled? Specifically, we're dealing with the indicative mood here. In the indicative mood, the statement is assumed to be true. The statement is assumed true in the indicative mood. And then we have person on the next page. Notice these other moods we'll be talking about in other chapters. We'll come back to those later. The person. In general, the person describes the voice. Person describes the action of the verb in relation to the one who is speaking. Now, if I'm using first person, I'm saying it's the person speaking. First person, the person speaking. Write that in your workbook. The person speaking. Second person is the person spoken to. And third person is the person spoken about. Person speaking, person spoken to, person spoken about. That's person. Number is probably the simplest aspect, and that is, it tells whether the speaker is one or more. And if it's one, it's singular. If it's more, it's plural. There is no dual, as in some languages, only singular and plural. One, more than one. That's number. Now, we have to distinguish in our forms between tense, voice, mood, person, number. And there will be a different form for each one, as opposed to English. You note that in English we have only one form of the verb. For instance, we may say, I loose. You loose. Now, I don't change the form of the verb at all. I simply say, I loose, you loose. Same verb will do for both. I have to indicate who is doing the loosing by putting a pronoun in. You don't need that in Greek, but in English we have to have it. The verb stays same. Loose, loose. We do have a hint of a change that in the third person singular, if I want to say he, I don't say he loose. I shouldn't. I say he looses. Looses. There's a little s there, which indicates the third person. That's the only difference we have in the verb form in English. in the third person singular. Then I want to may say, we loose, you loose, and then they loose. Now, in English we have only one change in form. In Greek we have a form for each one of those. So we'll look at those on the next page, and this is in your workbook on page 20, paragraph 18. Now, here's what we have indicated there from here on down. This is paragraph 18. Now, what we have is the stem, and the stem of Leo is this, just without the omega. So, the stem of vlepo is vlep, the stem of grapho is graph, the stem of lego is leg, the stem of didasko is didask. Now, this then becomes the ending. This tells me I have first person because I have the first person suffix. Now, if I draw a line then down here, understanding this is the stem, and I draw a line right down here, then I have the first person, and this is singular. I have the first person singular, I have the second person singular, and the third person singular. O, is, e. The same is true in the plural. Omen, ete, usi. So, understanding that this is the stem and that there's a stem in every word, then we won't learn every word in these, we'll simply learn the endings. So for the present active indicative of any word, I will add to it these endings. O, is, e, omen, ete, usi. And you'll find on the cassette tape that we have spoken these many times. O, is, e, omen, ete, usi. O, is, e, omen, ete, usi. Use that as a way of learning the endings, and then put those endings on any stem. If I have it on the loose stem, then this means I loose. If I have it on the vlep stem, it means I see. Or if I put the vlep down here, it would be you see. Now, the translation then will be for this one, I. For the second person singular, you. Third will be either he, she, or it, because the person spoken to or about could be he, she, or it, or the thing spoken about. Then we have the we, and the Machen has ye because of the, he used that in his day. We will use you, plural, or you could put ye if you want. I have no problem with that. Ye. Or you can put y'all. How about that? Y'all. Either way, but this one, instead of thou, we'll write you. So you will be singular, and if I mean you plural, I have to put a plural. You plural, or ye. Ye's not too bad, or y'all. The reason we don't stay with the thou is that thou makes you say a different verb. Thou loosest, as you see there, and that can get all kinds of difficult. So we'll stay with that. You for singular, you plural, or ye, or y'all for second person plural. Then we have, of course, they as the third plural. Now, learn not only your vocabulary then for this lesson, but learn also the endings, and then be able to put those endings on any verb. The rest of the chapter is simply explaining some of the things which I showed in the chart there. In paragraph 21, for instance, says, there is no distinction between I loose, which simply represents the action as taking place in present time, and I am loosing, which calls for a continuation, or calls attention to the continuation. So what he's saying is, when I say Leo, I loose, or Leo, I am loosing, I'm really saying something different, but the Greek only has one form for that. When we get into the past tense, it will be two separate forms for that. This is looking at the action as happening looking at it as a happening. We normally denote a point, though the point can be very wide. It's still a point. Looking at it as happening, the continuation would be more like that. I am loosing, a continuation thing. So note that in paragraph 21. And then I think you're ready to go to the exercises. Once you've learned all of that, remember, don't do your exercises until you've learned them all, the forms and the vocabulary. Have it down cold, and then go to the exercises and write the English that represents this Greek. You see in paragraph 23? He has vlepis, enoskis, lomvanis. If you're doing this in some kind of class, the instructor should go over all of these very carefully, go one by one, and let you drill on this. And then when you do your homework, you'll need to write this to be graded, or grade it yourself if you're doing it on your own. Vlepis will be you see, enoskis, you know, lomvanis, you take, and so forth, on through that section. And then when you come to the we are knowing, or we see, or we are seeing, then you have the, you go to the other way and you make the Greek word that represents that. Now when you get to we see and we are seeing, remember that's going to be the same word, because when I say I loose, I am loosing, if I want to say we see, I will do vlepomen, and vlepomen can either be we see or we are seeing. See? So what he's doing is asking you to write that same word twice in response to those two phrases. Now continue to do that until you really understand it, and you should have the present active indicative down, and then after that we'll go on and get some subjects in lesson 4 and 5, and we'll be able to write complete sentences. Do your homework, make sure it's all done, keep up with it, and then we'll see you on lesson 4. Welcome back. Did you get all of your work done for lesson 3? Did you learn your vocabulary and forms, and did you do all the exercises? If you did, you can do some 48 forms now. You can identify 48 different Greek words just in what you've done. Today we're going to pick up some more, and we'll learn some vocabulary, get some nouns, so that you can put subjects and objects and all that kind of thing with your verbs. So pay attention as we go to lesson 4, page 23, and workbook page 5. We'll do the vocabulary first. The vocabulary starts with adelphos, a brother. Now you see it's adelphos, o, a brother. That o indicates to you that it's a masculine word. Has nothing to do with the at this point. So just know that the o there is the masculine article, which says adelphos is a masculine noun. Later on we'll see a different one. The second word is anthropos, a man. Now, you remember adelphos because of the word Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. Adelphos, and philos, the word love. Adelphos, a brother. Anthropos, a man. The word anthropology, you shouldn't have any problem with that. Anthropos, a man. Apostolos, an apostle. Now that is self-explanatory. That's simply a transliteration from the Greek into the English. Apostolos, an apostle. Doulos, a slave or a servant. Doron, do. Now this is not o, but do, and that makes this a neuter noun. The own ending and the to also indicate to us that this is a neuter noun, doron, a gift. Thanatos, a death. Iaron, do, a temple, is another neuter noun. And notice that the iota and epsilon are together, but they're not a diphthong, because the iota is a closing vowel, and that always closes a syllable. So you have ieron, though, a temple. Ke is the word for and. Logos, a word. Nomos, a law. Ekos, a house. And Eos, a son. That's the vocabulary. And before we go into any of the explanations of the grammar, I'd like for us to look at the forms that we have over on the flip chart. You see here the forms for logos. We have the various cases indicated. This is the nominative, the genitive, the dative, and accusative. Those are the 4 cases that we'll be dealing with. We'll talk about the other vocative, but for now we're dealing only with 4 cases, and that's all we have to worry about. So, just as in the verb, we had a stem. This is the stem, and the last 2 letters here, os, that is the ending. Os, and then the u, o, on. So let's draw a line down here like we did with the verb in the last chapter. And you see that these are the endings. Now, whatever word we have, logos, adelphos, whatever, that os is the ending, and the rest of it is the stem. So I can put any word here. I can put adelphos, and then adelphu, adelpho, adelphon, just as logos, logo, logo, logon. And this then is going to tell us what case it is. Singular, os, the plural, e. Now that's the way we're going to tell the uses